Hello everyone, today I'll be going over Beginning Java Lesson 2. As a quick review, let's answer these questions. So first, what are the 5 data types and what's an example of each? Pause and come back once you're ready. So the first one I can think of is string. An example is Katie is cool, wrapped around double quotes. Next we have integers or int. An example would be 9. Next we have a double, and an example of that would be 9.0. A boolean, and you can set it as false or true. And last we have character or char, and an example could just be x wrapped around single quotes. More review. So what could we type in the main class to print 23? Think of one simple way and one complex way. Pause and come back once you're ready. So the simple way is just doing this, where you do system.out.println and you simply write 23 with the double quotes as the parameter. The more complex way is like this, where you apply string concatenation, and all you have to do is create two variables, one that stores 2 and the other that stores 3, and you add it up, and that's how you print it as 23. So a quick overview. Today we'll be learning about scanners and loops. So scanners. Java scanners are used to take in user input, and as a programmer, you can do something with the inputs. So this is typically used when your program asks the user a question and the user responds. So how do you use this? First, you want to import scanner before declaring your main class. And this import line is what you want to write above the main class, so not inside the main function. And inside the main class, within the main function, that's where you declare your scanner. And you write scanner, and the name of the scanner equals new scanner system.in. After that, you will print a question for the user. After printing the question, set a variable for that data type equal to the user's input. What that basically means is if the user enters a word, so it's a string, that means the variable has to be a string. If the user enters a number, like an integer, then your variable has to be an integer, and so on. So in this case, we're doing a string variable, so you're doing string name is equal to the name of scanner dot next line. And the dot next line takes in the next line, the dot next int takes in the next integer, and dot next double takes in the next double. So this is here in action in CodePad. So the first step is always to import the scanner. After that, in the main function, you want to declare the scanner by creating a variable name for the scanner. After that, you want to print out a question such as what is your name? After printing the question, you want to create a variable to accept the user input by doing the scan.nextLine. And for this example, I decided to print out hello and the user's name. So this is what it will look like in the console. So it's your turn. In your CodePad, create a program that asks the user what their favorite food is. And in response, print out, cool, I like that food too. So a hint is to use the scanner and variables we just learned in the previous slides. So pause this video and come back to see an example. So what you can do is the following. So we have the import statement and declaring the scanner. So after that, we're just printing the question, what's your favorite food? And then we're just accepting the user's input with the dot next line. And then we're just printing out the I like that food too using string concatenation. Now onto loops. So loops are used to repeat a section of code rather than typing it repeatedly. We have 3 different types of loops. The first, while loops, and this is a loop where while a condition is true, you do this. So the do this part is just a code. A do while loop is you do the code first, and then you check if a condition is true. If it is true that you want to do that code again, if it's not, it will stop. And this is the same thing for a while loop. If the condition is false, it'll just terminate the loop. And lastly, we have for loops. So for loops, you want to set a counter to declare when it should stop looping, and then increment or decrement the counter, so you can increase it by 1 or 2, or you can decrease it by 1 or 2, and so on. So what's the difference between a while loop and a do while loop? More specifically, while loops checks for the condition before executing the code block, and again, it will terminate if it is false. A do while loop, on the other hand, always executes the code block at least once, and the condition is checked after the execution. So let's see it with the syntax. So we have the while loop, and it looks like this. So it's while the condition within the parentheses, and then the code goes inside the curly braces. So you would typically use this when you're asking the user for the correct password until it is valid. Or you would allow the player to continue playing a certain game as long as they're still alive. A do while loop looks like this, and it's pretty similar kind of with the while condition on the bottom, but what's different, it has this do part at the top. And you would typically use a do while loop when you want to show a game menu at least once. So this do part will just show the game menu, or you want to ask the user for their name at least once. And a for loop is used when you know in advance how many times you want to repeat a block of code. So that's like the initialization part with the counter and everything. So the basic syntax is the following, where you have the initialization followed by a semicolon, then the condition, semicolon, and then the update, which is the increment or the decrement. And then within here, you have the code to repeat. So an example is where you want to go from I is 1 to I less than or equal to 5. And then the update is just you're increasing I by 1. So this plus plus is just a shorthand way to write I plus equals 1. And within the loop, we are repeatedly printing out the value of I. So let's see what that looks like. So I'm just going to copy. Okay. And as you can see, it prints out the numbers from 1 to 5 because we're looping this 5 times. Okay, so as an exercise, please create a while loop, do while loop, or for loop to count from 1 to 20 and print every number in the console. So you can do this in a new code pad or an existing one. And a quick hint is to create a int counter variable if you're using a while loop or do while loop. So pause and come back to see an example answer. Okay, so for the while loop approach, this is what you would do. You would obviously have your main class, and within that main function, you would declare a counter variable, set that to 1, and then the condition would just be while the counter is less than or equal to 20, because you want to count to 20. You want to print out the counter and increase it by 1 so you can count from 1 to 20. For the do while loop approach, it's somewhat similar. You have the counter to 1, you're printing the counter first, and then you're incrementing it, and then the condition is the same, where you're checking while counter is less than or equal to 20, continue printing. And lastly, the for loop approach, which I personally like this better because it's short and easy to use. You have the for initialization, I is equal to 1, I is less than or equal to 20, and the I plus plus, or I increased by 1, and you're simply printing out I 20 times, so 1 to 20. And to see what it looks like, actually I'll use a do while loop. Okay, so as you can see, this do while loop successfully prints the numbers from 1 to 20 inclusive. And it should have the same output for all 3 loops. Alright, so quick review. Provide an example of using scanners in a project we haven't talked about. Compare while loops to do while loops. Which is better? Lastly, describe the elements of a for loop. So pause and think about it, unpause, and we'll reveal the answers. So for the first question, it will be to ask the user to guess a number in a higher or lower game. So this is like an example answer. It can really be anything else. But yeah, scanners are really useful for taking user input. So anything that requires that is a valid answer. For the second one, while loops do something after the checking, while a do while loop does something before the checking. So both are equally good, none is better than the other. It just depends on what you're doing and your comfortability with each type of loop. And lastly, a for loop has a counter, condition to stop, and the increment or decrement part. And then within the curly braces, you have your code. So that's it. Thank you so much, everyone.